Hello, this is a past paper walkthrough for Edexcel A Level History, Paper 3, which is Civil Rights and Race Relations in the USA, 1850 to 2009. And in this video, I'm just going to talk through Section A, which is the source question. I'm not going to talk about the kind of structure of the question specifically in this video. I've done a separate video on that, and I'll link to that in the description. So if you're looking for how to answer those questions, have a look at that video. This is really talking about this specific question and how I would go about answering it. I'll do subsequent videos on sections B and C as well. Okay, so this is 2018, paper 3, and the question is, assess the value of the source for revealing the reasons for the election of Barack Obama as Senator for Illinois in 2004 and the nature of his subsequent campaign for the Democratic Party nomination for the presidency of the United States. So they are the two inquiries that we are looking at. Okay, the value of the source for the reasons for the election of Obama as senator in 2004, and then the nature of his subsequent campaign for the Democrat Party nomination. Okay, so here is the source. I'm not going to read through the source in its entirety because it wouldn't be very interesting, and also you could potentially do that. You can pause this and read through it, or you could find it. It's on the Edexcel website. So to begin with, let's look at the provenance. And obviously we haven't read the sources yet, but let's look at the provenance of the source and just what this might give us. The provenance box information here is extremely important. And obviously when you've read through it, you'll have more of an understanding of the provenance. But before we get stuck into the source, let's have a look at this. I usually recommend writing about the provenance in paragraph 3, talking about the provenance for both inquiries, but you could talk about this in paragraph 1 if you wanted to. So the source is from Todd Spivak, Obama and Me, an article in the Houston Press newspaper published in February 2008. Spivak was an investigative reporter and distinguished lawyer, winning national awards for his journalism, and this article is focusing on Obama's rise to political prominence. So I'll keep the inquiries up here. Let's get into this a little bit. So it's from an article, it's from a newspaper article in the Houston Press, and it's published in 2008. So we could say that in terms of the audience, which is useful, and it's useful kind of thinking about who the audience is, Houston, if you know anything about American geography, is in Texas, and Texas is in the South, which is not really renowned for its Democrat politics. It's usually Republican, especially at this time. It would be kind of Republican leaning. So perhaps this is going to be less sympathetic. Obviously, we haven't read through the source yet. We don't know, but that's something to keep in mind. Also, Spivak is an investigative reporter and a distinguished lawyer. Okay, so investigative reporter. So this is somebody who's in a good position to talk about kind of Obama as a politician, and particularly kind of policies and things like that. Won national awards for journalism. So this is somebody who is going to bring value to this. It's not a kind of random person with no kind of experience. And the article is focused on the inquiries. Okay, so it is a kind of useful. It has value there. So for both inquiries, really, the nature of the article has value. The origin of the article, we don't know anything about Todd Spivak. We don't know what his politics are, but we could say, well, it's kind of in Houston, it's in Texas, so we maybe be wary of that. The purpose of this, well, the purpose is focusing on Obama's rise to political prominence, and I've talked about the audience. Okay. So they are things to kind of keep in mind, and you would talk about them in kind of paragraph 3. But it's bringing quite a lot of value already, and that's a key word in the question, assess the value. So it's bringing value to both inquiries because of the nature and the provenance of the source. Okay, so I'm not going to read through this in its entirety. As I said, I'm just going to pick out the key quotes. So for the first inquiry, the reasons for the election of Obama as senator for Illinois. So the first thing that really stood out here is it talks about how Obama lost in 1999, but then it talks about his victory in 2004, specifically talking about the self-destruction of his top opponents. Okay, so you could use that and you could quote that and then say, the inference here is that Obama's success was because of others' failures. And you could talk about, for example, the person he was up against 2004, Alan Keyes. was not successful. So that would be a useful one for the first inquiry. Okay. The next one is about somebody who helped Obama. So this is again saying that it wasn't down to Obama himself. He relied on others. And it talks about Emil Jones, who becomes Obama's kingmaker. And then, so the inference here again is Obama had help from others who, helped him rise to prominence, helped him win that election in 2004 for the Senate. And then you could talk about potentially the second paragraph talks about his policies. So you could actually talk about his policies and his kind of legislative success as an Illinois legislator in the Illinois State Senate. You could perhaps bring that in and say that, so the inference here is that Obama had a track record of, being involved in passing legislation. Okay, so for all of those, it brings value. It gives us some useful evidence, and we can make useful inferences there. However, what it doesn't really talk about, and this is something if you talk about limitations potentially towards the end of that first paragraph on Inquiry 1, is that it doesn't really talk about Obama himself. It doesn't really talk about Obama's kind of charisma. It doesn't really talk about Obama's background. So in some ways, it's quite limited. And again, if we get back to the provenance, we're starting to get a sense that the purpose of this is really to say Obama's kind of not all that. He's relied on others. Okay? So for the second inquiry, there's actually not as much for the second inquiry, because it is really focused on Obama winning the 2004 election to be Illinois senator. So when we come into the conclusion of which one it's most useful for, it seems quite clear that because this is primarily focused on 2004, it helps us. It's got some value for 2008, but it's not as valuable. Okay, so that's probably where I would come down. So, in terms of the nature of his subsequent campaign for the Democratic Party nomination, okay, I would probably start off with talking about this. It's a lengthy record filled with core liberal values, and that Obama kind of stuck to the Democrat Party line, both as an Illinois legislator, but also in the U.S. Senate, and he kind of used that in 2008 when he was running for Democrat Party nomination. You could also talk about, the fact he's liberal. He was against the war in Iraq. That's quite important when you're talking about 2008 and the reasons for his success. Although you've got to work quite hard at that, so it's not explicit here, is it? Okay, the next one I think which is the most useful one, is this one here. So he uses this record that he has as an Illinois state senator when he's attacked as inexperienced in the presidential campaign. And that's something that he used when he was against Hillary Clinton, for example. He used his record. It says, I'm not as inexperienced as everybody's making out. So the nature of his subsequent campaign, he's highlighting his kind of legislative success. So that would be something you could talk about. The inference here is that Obama used that, to help his campaign. Okay. And then again, I think the Todd Spivak is talking about how Obama had help from Emil Jones, and actually Jones really kind of like is really supporting Obama over others, and really helps Obama get ahead in his kind of political career. So Jones appointed Obama sponsor of every high-profile piece of legislation, angering many rank-and-file state legislators that had more seniority and had spent years championing the bills. So this is that Obama, for his Democratic nomination, had support of experienced politicians. Again, it's getting at this idea that it wasn't him. So in terms of limitations, we should know from our own knowledge that there are other reasons for Obama's success and other reasons that he focused, that he focused on in his campaign. So they are the kind of points that I'd pick out to make inferences from. And in terms of provenance, I think we'd go back to the idea that and something about this when we think about purpose is that the purpose of this, when now we've read through it, really seems to be it's focusing on the external reasons for Obama's success rather than focusing on Obama himself, and Obama's kind of own traits is his public speaking. It doesn't talk about the Democratic National Convention speech, The Audacity of Hope. It doesn't talk about that in 2004, which is a huge moment in both of these inquiries, right? It doesn't talk about specifically about the failure of his opponents in 2008 either. So there's some limitations there, but it does have value for both. As I say, I'd probably come down saying that it's most useful for Enquiry 1. Okay, I hope that was useful. If you've got any questions, please let me know, and check out the video on how to answer source questions for the exact structure. Thanks for listening.